So now, we'll examine two different journeys that highlight what can happen when all of those elements come together. First, to share insights on her company's journey to a more accessible, transparent payroll, please welcome Director, Head of Global Payroll for Meta, Shel Whitfield.
That's the most nervous bit, walking up those stairs. Hello, everybody. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm going to share a little bit about my career journey, and what I've learned along the way. Today, I serve as the Global Payroll Leader at Meta. I'm based in Dublin. But even if our name doesn't ring a bell, you'll know our family of apps: Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. I've come a long way since my first job. It was in a pub in South Shields, which is in the northeast of England. It was called the Turk's Head. On my first payday, I got cash. It was £12, and I spent it all. At the same time, I was actually studying electrical, electronic, and computer engineering at college. And when I finished that, I realized that I loved the theory, loved the books, but I was no good at the practical part of it. And I have lots of scars to prove it. So I went traveling, and when I got back, my mum and dad said, "You can't lie in bed all day and watch TV. You need to get a job." So I went for a machine test at a local clothing manufacturer in my hometown. I didn't perform well on the machine test, so they offered me a job in the wages office. My first job was calculating piecework. So in the factory was lots of machinists. Every day they would have a sheet of paper, and it'd have their name and number on it. Every piece of work had a little ticket, a little white ticket, and at the end of the day, they'd put the ticket onto the sheet, and at the end of the day, they'd send those tickets to me, the sheets to me. Each one of those tickets had a different price, so depending on how many jobs or what different jobs they'd done, I'd have to calculate their gross pay. I had a big counter machine. If they were wrong, so every morning I'd send the sheets out, but if the sheets were wrong, they'd come and complain. I had the best team of auditors in that factory. So they'd come into my office, into the office where it was about 6 of us at the time, come into the office, and they would wait until you sorted the issue out. They'd be right in front of you. There was one lady I particularly remember called Pam Humphrey. She was clock number 326. Still remember her. Tiny little thing. But she would come and complain almost every day about her pay, even if it was 1 penny, to the point that I actually had a jar of pennies on my desk, especially for Pam, and I'd give her that penny because it wasn't worth the calculation. At the end of every week, we'd put the gross amount of pay onto a big green dot matrix sheet. And those sheets would get sent to the vendor to calculate the gross to net. It's a big pile of sheets. And that would come back on a Wednesday night. And on Thursday, we would request the funds. And on Friday, a big box of cash would be delivered to the office with pay packets. And I would have to put each person's pay packet together. It was all done manually. You knew exactly how much you had to pay to each person. You knew how many notes and of what denominations and coins. So if you got to the end of creating the pay packets, if you had money left, or you didn't have enough money, you had to go back and open up all those packets until you had no money left and everybody had the right amount. There was 350 people in that factory, so you definitely didn't want to have to reopen them. So I did that for about 10 years, and then I moved to a printed circuit board manufacturer. The workforce was about the same size, but it was in 2 factories. And they outsourced their payroll to a vendor. So we would key the data into their platform, and then we'd press the button. It was basically a gross to net machine. We processed the bank file directly to employees. We printed and distributed the pay slips. By then, we'd actually moved to being paid by backs, which was great. Unfortunately, that company went into receivership, so I needed to get another job. I got the opportunity to be a contractor with a company that was implementing an ERP system. That was a huge transition. In this time, it was when I first got to learn on the job about an ERP system. What's an ERP system? And how powerful they could be. Then shortly after that, I got an opportunity to work for PricewaterhouseCoopers, again, back in my hometown. At PwC, the team supported the entire payroll for the Safeway grocery store. So at that time, it was about 100,000 people in 500 stores. I'd been with PwC a little while, and I realized it just wasn't a good fit for me. I decided I'd wanted to do more. I realized that I wanted to be part of defining a payroll strategy rather than just being tactical in delivering it. That's when I got the opportunity to use an ERP system again in a broader EMEA role in electronic data systems. This was a powerful learning experience, understanding more about payroll beyond the UK. And then I joined Honeywell in 2007 as their EMEA payroll leader. Honeywell had about 140,000 employees at that time in 85 countries, and they hadn't invested in developing their payroll strategy. At that time, in the EMEA region, Honeywell's net pay accuracy was less than 90% on a monthly basis. So I knew that that's what I had to fix. The best time to get a job is when something's broken, because you can only make it better. So my question was, how do we increase accuracy? How do we improve the experience for employees? So I designed a strategy to standardize platforms and processes. Our goal was to have 80% of our processes to be the same regardless of the platform that we were using in that country. So in the EMEA region, we deployed SAP in our 14 largest geographies, but we used data and metrics to drive the decisions as opposed to being emotional. We used Six Sigma methodologies to design process improvements, and we looked at how could we optimize our SAP system. After 2 years, Honeywell added the APAC region to my responsibilities. Honeywell was actually ADP's second client in Global View in Asia Pac. At the time, we had some inefficiencies in the relationship. So we implemented a new governance process. Every month, I met with the ADP team, and we talked about areas to improve. I'm a huge believer that partnership is the most important part of any client-vendor relationship. So you have to be talking about what's the win-win for both parties. We had to define success and intentionally measure the progress. So we used data and metrics to determine the best path forward. We focused on reducing and eliminating tickets. It was an education for my team. How would we do things? How could we do things better? And how could we be a good partner? We created a really, really strong relationship in ADP that I believe Honeywell still has today, with open lines of communication. We then started to really investigate how could we optimize the use of ADP Global View in the region. We realized that there were lots of opportunities and to use the capabilities in Global View. Because when we had moved to Global View initially, we'd actually replicated the bad processes from our previous suppliers. So we knew we could use our technology to be much more efficient. So that's what we did. We replicated some of the principles that we'd used in the EMEA region on our previous platform, and we completely remodeled the Asia Pac platforms as well. Then we focused on our long tail, the locations with our smaller headcounts. We went to ADP Streamline and expanded our relationship with them. And it was phenomenal. They did an amazing job. But because we focused on the 80%, we wanted to follow that through with the Streamline product and processing. This process reminds me back to my early career in manufacturing. In fact, payroll, I think, of a bit like a manufacturing line. There are raw materials that you take through a process. You make something, and at the end of it, you've got a product. So if you liken a pay slip to a car, I know, extreme, there are about 4,000 parts in a car. Those 4,000 parts are the same with every model that you get, and it comes out of the factory exactly the same. With a pay slip, almost every item on that pay slip is different by employee. In a month, to produce pay slips, there could be millions of different parts in those pay slips, depending on the size of your company and the complexity of your industry. And you need all of those parts to get your net pay correct and the product, the paycheck, to the employee. So how do you take the waste and eliminate the effort through the course of the process? It helps that I am the laziest person in the world. I want to make sure that if I do something, I only have to do it once. I don't have to audit it. I don't have to repeat it, because all of that's just waste. I could be doing something much better. That's why I think of payroll as a manufacturing line, where you need to minimize the time you spend on quality control as much as possible. You build your quality upstream, where the data is created, not when it comes into payroll. It's too late. By the time using all of these strategies, we actually achieved an accuracy of 99.8 plus globally and 100% regularly in most countries. I loved Honeywell, and I never thought I would leave. But after meeting a peer here in ADP, I think it was ADP Rethink 2014, that peer actually helped change my career journey a little bit. In 2020, my Rethink connection from 2014 actually introduced me to Sue Taylor, who is the Chief Accounting Officer at Meta. And Sue explained to me her vision of the future and what part payroll would play in it. I could see that this could be my last big transformation. So I joined Meta in 2021, excited to do something really cool at a really cool company. It was interesting to move to a company that was so young and changing so much, to a company that was more than 100 years old, where we had formal practices and standards, to a much more agile company with a far faster approach in doing things. That was a really big challenge. But also the culture of collaboration was also very different. There is so much opportunity to try new things and think about what the impact is going to be on employees. As you can imagine at Meta, there's lots of engineers, and engineers love simplicity. Though we're a leading technology company, our payroll and our pay slips were very old-fashioned. Just a piece of paper with your gross pay and net pay on it. As a technology organization who's shaping its payroll strategy, one of our questions, my questions, was how do we create a more sustainable, efficient process at the same time as having a contemporary feel for payroll? We selected ADP GlobalView for our largest countries, with the exception of the United States. One of the things I think about when I think about contemporary is the only communication that an employee gets in a company is their pay slip. It's the most regular communication that an employee gets. It's a reflection of how important employees are to a company, so that each employee deserves a great employee experience. With GlobalView, we have the contemporary MyPay payslip. You can still get your traditional payslip if that's what you want, but you can have this very easy view of payroll and what it means to them. The payslip in ADP, in my view, is a great contemporary take on the traditional payslip. It's so much more digestible than the paper payslip, than a bunch of numbers that mean nothing to you. And it's green. You don't have to have any paper. But it's great to be able to see how your pay compares to previous months and see where your money's actually going. We've now implemented GlobalView, and the feedback from our employees is amazing. They love it. They're loving the new look. They've said they can actually understand their pay slip for the first time. ADP invests heavily in research and development for payroll. They're constantly looking at how they can make payroll easier and how to support their clients. We benefit from that wealth of knowledge on a regular basis. And I think R&D is a key differentiator between ADP and other vendors. They're always looking at what's the next big thing from a payroll experience. When you choose a vendor, who you're going to work with, and I think Virginia said it earlier, especially in payroll, you're setting out a long-term relationship where both parties want to have a successful strategic relationship. Together, we need to be thinking about what's good for us as a client, but also what's good for ADP. How can we share feedback? It's got to be open, candid, two-way communication at best. I expect ADP to tell me when I'm wrong, but I also expect ADP to understand when I tell them they're wrong. I'm sorry, Dawn. But it's always said from a place of growth. You know, how do we get better? How do we do things better? How do we do things better together? I like to use the analogy of when you go to a bar or a restaurant, and you're rude to the server. You're going to get really bad service. But if you're nice, genuine, you'll most likely get great service. They'll probably get a nice tip. And then when you go back, they're going to remember you, and you'll get great service again. A great partnership, relationship is focused on how do you make things work for both parties. In our payroll transformation at Meta, we're well underway with implementing ADP Global View in our largest countries. In November last year, we went live with the UK, tremendous, successful go live. And just last week, we went live successfully, with Ireland, with another 5 countries rolling out this year. That'll cover 80% of our global payroll outside of the US. And we are now starting to look at how do we support our remaining 36 countries, maintaining the goal of sustainable, efficient payroll, but with an amazing employee experience. So whether you're in Uzbekistan or Argentina, you have that same payroll experience. But what that means is there's a lot of change. And we've got to be planned about how we do things. We really had to look at our end-to-end processes. What happens at Meta before we send data to our vendors. Currently, we have 54 different vendors in 45 countries around the world. And we're trying to reduce that number to 2. As I think about the payroll transformation, it never ends. Good job, because I wouldn't have a job. Legally, the regulations in every country change at least once a year. And technology has to keep up with that, on those demands, put on employers, especially from the legal changes. We need platforms that can keep up with those changes. Reporting requirements on employers are higher than they've ever been. So your tools have to be able to keep up with that, to be able to provide employees with what they want. What do employees expect for the future? I'm sure everybody's heard about the metaverse. And it's one of the key initiatives that we have at Meta. I was talking to one of the senior leaders at Rethink last year, and we were having a big conversation about Oculus and the Quest 2 headset, and about the metaverse and what did it mean. And how could you potentially use the metaverse for things like training and development? I recently received a deck from a hackathon that took place in ADP Brazil, and it was about how the metaverse and the Oculus 2 could help support businesses and some of their functions. There were about 3 to 4 business user cases. And it was really just exciting that from one conversation, there could be this opportunity for Meta and ADP to do something together in the metaverse in the future. Because ultimately, as an employer, you don't want your employees thinking about payroll. It should be invisible. Payroll is like electricity. You don't miss it until it's not there. So the payroll strategy is always asking, how can I take as many variables out of the process as possible? How can I make it more efficient? How can I answer the questions that employees have before they even know they have to ask the question? I don't think there are many people in payroll today who faced very angry employees or who didn't get paid correctly. It's very different from getting a support ticket or a phone call. You're invisible to them. I've had that experience of being face-to-face with employees or union reps who are not happy, defending on why they've been paid what they've been paid, or figuring out what went wrong with that pay packet. I think once you've had that experience, you think about how you support your employees differently. I often ask my teams, would you answer the same problem in the same way if that person was standing in front of you? So as I close, payroll is, again, often the only consistent connection to every employee when they get paid every pay period. An employee needs to know that their organization cares about them and that they deserve an accurate payroll. So that's what we all do and why we do payroll. Thank you.